The great prize in the battle for dominance between Israelis and Palestinians is Jerusalem. Incongruously, its name means City of Peace, something neither side seems to want. This week, there were more protests and more deaths after the United States relocated its embassy to the Holy City. The move recognises Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish state, and that, as Tom Steinfort reports, enrages Palestinians like nothing else.
It's the most contested piece of real estate in the world. Jerusalem's Temple Mount, where the Golden Dome sits. Jews, Christians and Muslims have been fighting and dying here for centuries. Just this week, Israeli troops killed scores of Palestinian Muslims protesting the relocation of the US Embassy to Jerusalem.
How empowered are you by America deciding to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
An obvious but tremendous move. If I could take my head covering off and say thank you to Trump, I would do that. But
Mightn't be the most popular move.
that's if you're scared of the Arab world. The hills are alive with the sounds of Jews.
Australian-born Daniel Luria is one of Israel's fiercest flag wavers, and in this ancient turf war, he insists the Jews have a divine right to this land.
I've been here for 3,800 years. I am the indigenous people here, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong.
Do you feel like you're winning the war?
1,000%.
There's no nice way of doing settlement construction in occupied territory. It's one reason why it's illegal.
Lawyer Gerard Horton is another Australian living here, but that's where the similarities end. He passionately believes Israel's expansionism is an international disgrace.
Settlement construction in occupied territory is a war crime.
It's a pretty severe charge.
It's the law.
Back in 1967, Israel, fearing an Arab invasion, pushed out, claiming most notably the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Palestinians considered this land home, and they were backed on that by the UN. But Israel has consistently ignored international condemnation, encouraging its citizens to colonise this territory, starting with East Jerusalem.
These walls, if these stones could speak, they'd probably be saying, "Welcome home, Daniel." They may have even been saying, "Welcome 60 Minutes." The stones of Jerusalem, every stone here has a story.
Daniel Luria is taking me through the famous Damascus Gates into the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City.
Throughout the whole of the Old City, because of the security situation, there's a lot more police presence. It was a Jewish quarter before it was the Muslim quarter, where there were 21 synagogues and 6 centres of Jewish life. Shalom, welcome. Welcome to Israel.
Welcome to Palestine.
Palestine actually is the Jewish national homeland, according to the world. Welcome to the Jewish land of Israel.
Forever, Palestine. Palestine.
So it's obvious you're not overly popular here.
For sure, there's no shortage of Arabs here to say that we shouldn't be here.
And that's very apparent at this location. Just a week earlier, a Jewish man was stabbed to death here by an Arab.
How do you feel knowing that one of your Jewish brothers was murdered right here last week?
He wasn't murdered. We were all murdered. When one person is killed, it's felt in here.
In direct response, Daniel set up this Jewish shop right at the location of the murder. A small symbolic gesture that's part of a much bigger business of buying Arabs out of their properties so Jewish settlers can move in.
So we bring Jewish life back to the heart of Jerusalem. Today there's 1,000 Jews living in the old Jewish quarter, what is today called the Muslim quarter. It was the main Jewish area till the Jews were kicked out. An Arab sells, a Jew buys. It's real estate. Holy real estate. Mishu babayit kan? There's a Jewish family down here.
Daniel is helping buy back Jerusalem for the Jews. And business is good, but also extremely controversial.
This particular neighbourhood for us is the jewel in the crown.
from buying up Arab properties in the Muslim quarter of the Old City to developing a 100-unit complex in East Jerusalem, which will only be complete when this synagogue is finished.
This is a synagogue par excellence. To have a synagogue on the Mount of Olives for this Jewish neighbourhood looking back to the Temple Mount, what could be better?
His most controversial project yet is a huge residential development planned for this site called Kidmat Zion, which means East of Zion, and it's right in front of the now abandoned Palestinian Parliament.
The UN couldn't be clearer on this. What you're doing here is illegal.
Of course they say that, but they're living in La La Land.
Do you care if the United Nations gives you a rap over the knuckles?
No, zero. It's irrelevant. What, we have to bend and listen to them? Think about the absurdity of the matter when they claim that we don't have rights to Jerusalem or to Hebron.
But what they're
How can
saying
that
is
be?
that you do have rights to part of Jerusalem, but also the Palestinians have some rights too.
Palestinians have zero rights here, sovereign rights.
My personal assessment is this is much more serious, much more dangerous than apartheid.
Worse than apartheid.
Indeed. And the reason I say that is what is going on in the West Bank, I think, is pure de facto annexation. It's taking the land without responsibility for the people, and that's worse than apartheid.
Gerard Horton gave away a lucrative career as a Sydney barrister to move to Israel.
So, for example, where we're sitting now, we're sitting in East Jerusalem. That's been annexed by Israel. That hasn't been recognized internationally. The problem with that is, what are we supposed to say to, say, Putin when he annexes Crimea? Closer to home, what are we supposed to say to the Chinese when they continue to build islands in the South China Sea?
Gerard set up the advocacy group Military Court Watch to help protect Palestinian children imprisoned by Israeli authorities.
In some of these camps close to this road, people often tell us, half seriously, half joking, when we ask, how often is the military in your town? Sometimes they say 8 out of 7 days. I came for a couple of months to do some voluntary work, and I think what I saw shocked me profoundly.
You've been here a decade now. Has it got better or worse in that time?
Generally worse, relentlessly worse, with the expansion of the settlements. In 98% of cases we document, the children live and are arrested within 1.02 kilometres from a settlement.
In the refugee village of Al Arub, the story of Nasir is typical. Last year, when he was just 15, Nasir was jailed for 3 months for throwing stones at Jewish settlers.
What's the attitude of you and other young people around here to the settlers on the hill?
They cause a lot of harm and they are a source of fear, a deep, serious fear. We feel terrified of settlers.
What are you terrified of?
Incursions, night raids, shooting, arrests. These are the scary things.
There are 600,000 Jewish settlers estimated to be living in the occupied territories of East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And there are many more huge estates under development, each one a friction point.
Under the Fourth Geneva Convention, settlements in occupied territory are prohibited. They're classified as war crimes, and the 40 UN Security Council resolutions saying so.
But in the occupied territories, the Israelis are a law unto themselves. Abu Fadi ran this quarry on land his family has owned for generations. Then one day, the Israeli soldiers shut him down and confiscated his equipment because he was deemed to be a nuisance to the nearby Jewish settlement.
What do you think of the Israelis that did this to you?
Basically, the Israeli authorities don't want us even to eat bread. They're in power, they hold the power, and we have nothing in our hands we can do.
Even after losing everything, Abu Fadi insisted we have coffee.
To your health.
And he told me if an Israeli Jew came to his house, he'd offer them one as well. Other Palestinians aren't as hospitable.
But he's taking his pigeon dung. You know, if not the fact that you were here, I
So the
would probably
Jewish
say
house
something.
here is literally the dumping ground for the neighbourhood.
Right, and he doesn't care, he does it purposely. He's got his pigeon stuff, he's purposely just doing against the wall here, laughing and smiling. So this is what we're dealing with. He's brought up to hate. Now, whether he turns out to be a terrorist in
what
the
he
years
just
gone
said?
by, Well, he wasn't welcoming Australians to the neighbourhood, that's for sure.
Back in East Jerusalem, Daniel Luria is taking me into what he claims is the most attacked Jewish house in the occupied territories.
It's a pretty unenviable title.
I agree. I would like to live also in a quiet place.
Shira Tanami has lived here for 13 years. Her kids can't even walk outside without needing to be escorted by armed guards.
I mean, you've got a little fella here. You got 5 kids, was it?
Yes.
Do you worry about their safety?
Well, we have guards that the state of Israel is putting to protect us, cameras, whatever security we need.
What goes through your mind when you're lying in bed and you hear a Molotov cocktail slam into your house?
I know we're safe, and we know that God protects us. That's the most important part.
This is the oldest turf war in the world, and the situation on the Mount of Olives typifies the battle. Jews want to be buried here because they believe that when the Messiah eventually comes to the Temple Mount, they'll then be the first to be resurrected. But the Muslims won't have a bar of it, so they've actually built their own cemetery right over there in front of the old city walls, blocking the entry gates to the temple. Even when they're dead here, they're still fighting.
It is a battle over the heart of Jerusalem. I'm not pretending it's not a battle, but we are going to win it, ultimately.
Many hardline Israelis will say, this is their land. Did the Palestinians have a historical connection to this land?
Well, I mean, look around. There are a lot of Palestinians here. Where did they come from? How long have they been here? You know, of course.
What many of the Jews will argue is that they were here first.
And if you go back far enough, there were people here before Jews were in the land, and then there'll be people before that too. The point is, at what point do you draw the line? At what point, how far back in history can we go?
For anyone that has the arrogance and the gall to tell me that I don't have a right to live here, they can jump. It means nothing to me.
What if the Palestinians will fight you for this city?
They will not succeed because we're on this dream, this promise from God. There's nothing they can do. Those who want to live here in peace should be able to live here in peace, 100%. But you want to fight and drive me into the sea? You want to blow me up in a cafe and a restaurant? You want to come into my home and kill my children on a Friday night? You will not succeed. Because we have patience, perseverance, and belief. And there is nothing in the world that can change that.